Welcome to Making Democracy Work, a monthly series on topics of community interest brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Honolulu and Olelo. I am Pearl Johnson, Chair of the Planning and Transportation Committee of the League. Today, we're going to discuss whether the funding for the rail should be extended. And I have with me two guests, Panos Pravadouris of UH Manoa. Let me see now. You are chair of what?
The Department of Civil Engineering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Cindy Frith, who is the organizer of Time Out Honolulu. Thank you both for being with us.
Sure.
Our pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And Cindy, today there was a hearing at the Senate. We're taping this on April 7th, and you will be seeing this later. So on April 7th, Cindy, you went to a hearing of the Senate, and tell me what happened.
Yes, I did. The Ways and Means Committee was discussing House Bill 134, SD1, and today they were looking at SD2. And the outcome is still, I don't know what the outcome is because it went on all morning and was going to continue about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to leave, but it was quite a lively conversation between what the City Mayor Caldwell is looking for, which is a 25-year extension, and what the Senate would possibly give. And when after all the smoke, dust settled, it looked as though the House, with Jill Takuda as the chair of that Ways and Means Committee, the Senate, it looked as though they were considering a 5-year, possibly a 5-year extension, but they weren't very interested in a 25-year extension.
Now basically,
right.
What they're talking about is the 0.5% that is added on to the 4% general excise tax.
Correct.
Which is paid only by Oahu residents for the rail tax.
Exactly.
And now they're talking about extending that, well, for a period of time, which requires the legislative action.
Exactly, yes. The state has control over the GE tax surcharge, and it's supposed to sunset, according to all plans that we had heard from the get-go, that it's supposed to sunset on 2022. And now they're telling us through the HEART organization that we are suddenly finding ourselves with not enough funds to get through the first 20 miles and 21 stations, which is the current thrust of the rail project. They're telling us that they do not have enough money to complete that. Now, we also realize that from September of 2014, we were told by the HEART organization that we had a $633 million contingency fund. And suddenly, at the end of December, beginning of January, somewhere in that time frame, we're suddenly short $910 million.
All right, now I need to interject just a little background. HEART stands for Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, which is in charge of building the rail. Time Out Honolulu, of which Cindy is the organizer, is asking for a timeout of construction of the rail. Just stop everything and let's take a deep breath and figure out what we should do.
Exactly.
Right?
Basically,
Yes.
I would say that is pretty much exactly. I think everybody understands the concept of a timeout from the time you're a little child all the way up to the sports world, et cetera, et cetera. And we're looking for a forensic audit, which would be a much more stringent audit than some that they have today. And then also, we want to have a clear, clean vetting of any and all alternatives to this particular supposedly the alternative everybody chose, this heavy steel on steel rapid transit, this train. So that's really where we are. There are other things that we would like to see happen also that were never really clearly defined.
And
But
that's why we have Panos Prevadouris,
Yes.
our traffic expert here, because I think that we all agree that traffic will not be lessened when rail is fully implemented, if it's ever fully implemented. There are better alternatives, aren't there? So would you like to talk about that?
Well, I like to talk about a lot of things, but that's a good question. That's a good question. Of course, the biggest surprise to me and everybody else is how is it possible that a project, and I'm talking about the rail project, which is only 5% constructed, to be $1 billion in the hole.
Yes.
I mean, these are questions that you ask after at least you have 50% completion of the project, and then you realize, with the money that is left, I cannot get to the other half. How can you be at the 5% stage? I mean, we can go out in Couple A and look what they've done, which is, work, about 2 miles completed, but no stations, no trains here, a little bit of the facility for the facility for the train overnight storage, etc., the rail yard. But overall, the rail is done in a very small way. How come we run out of money? Now, here comes now why alternatives are important, because if we got such bad news with 5% only constructed, maybe really is a much better idea to stop what we are doing, take our losses, and clearly look for alternatives that they have two advantages. All of the alternatives have two advantages. They are far cheaper, and they directly address congestion, which is really what people want. They want a solution to their problem, and they want to pay less. And given now that HART was at least forthright about that, they could have put it under the carpet for many more years. They could have reached essentially Kaligi and then say, you know what, we have reached Kaligi and we're out of money. Then everybody would have been trapped. You really have to throw in the money to finish it. But now you only have 2 miles in the middle of Ho'opili, pure agricultural land next to the tomatoes and cornfields, and nothing to show for it. Maybe, and I fully agree with the position of Time Out Honolulu, maybe it's time to stop. What are we doing? Take it at least a time out and maybe consider that it is better to lose $1 billion and stop than continuing with this boondoggle. Now here comes the interesting part, that the mayor comes and Mr. Grabowskis, and they say that the losses we're going to incur are in the $2 or $3 billion range. And how come? Yes, of course you have issued contracts, and there is always language in the contracts, but none of these contracts have been built. So, Mr. Contractor, you who are here to build something for $1 billion, you haven't even started, because the city has bid the Aloha Stadium segment. That does not exist at all. Okay, Mr. Contractor, we made a mistake. Here is an X amount, pretty small, for damages, and we're out of the contract. They have not built any of that. Why is he building it as a cost? Who is that contractor who's going to take the case to court and the judge will say, oh, of course, yeah, of course, you were promised to build $1 billion. You haven't built anything, but the city must pay you $1 billion. It never happened. You can always exit contracts like this. It is not built. The Italians, the same. They didn't get a check for $1.5 billion. They got a deal for $1.5 billion. They have done so much work. Okay, pay for that, and we stop. This is very common in the private sector. Private sector always, when they see something doesn't work, they take their losses and they retrench. Taxpayer project monies, they keep throwing good money after bad. They never really reconsider, take time out, take a breath. I mean, this project, 5% constructed, $1 billion in the hole. And now here comes also the things I don't understand, and I tend to know a few things, and everybody thinks that there is a discontinuity, right? Why is Mayor Caldwell claiming that we ran out of money? How can you possibly run out of money when only 5% is constructed? They have not bid anything past downtown, so these things have not been even bid. How are you running out of money? For a projection in 2020, if you run out of money, you would be begging the legislature for oodles of money cash now. So he's talking about future money. Let's wait and see then. Why are we doing this in 2015? They haven't run out of money at all.
Now tell me something. They have 2 miles of elevated roadway.
Sure.
Could we put a road on there where buses could go
Well,
so that it would not be a total loss?
yes, the correct answer is yes, but not a road. You can put a busway. You have to use it with slightly modified buses that they're called guided buses. The reason for that is that the guideway is narrow. So you cannot really have buses go in 2 directions at 45 miles an hour or higher in such a narrow guideway. The transportation authorities would never allow that to happen. So we will have to use a system that they invented in Germany, and they use it heavily both in Germany and in Australia, which is called guided bus. Basically, you have some rubber wheels on the side of the steering wheel, and the bus cannot jump the track. It doesn't need tracks or anything. On the bed of what now it is out there in the field, they can run with a regular rubber tires, etc. You just have to make some modifications on the steering wheel so that doesn't steer more than 1 or 2 degrees and go on the other side. To keep it, in other words, going straight along the guideway, because it is a guideway, it's
Right.
not a roadway.
However, couldn't it be used as a base for a road? You could put a road on it. It would support a road, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we can dismantle the top structure and
Yes.
put a wider structure in it, yes.
Yes.
Particularly for the segment that has not been built. That's a good thing. That's why now it's another good time for timeout. Stop what we are doing and do something a little wider and more useful. So at least we have options to do something as a road, as a common busway, as a guided busway, etc.
All right, but let's go back to the 2 miles already built.
Yes.
I spoke to an engineer over the weekend, and he said there's no reason why it could not support a road, and why could not the superstructure above the support for the rail, why couldn't that be taken off and a road put there?
There are certain problems with that. It has been calculated for specific weights. The problem with this, the way you see it as a superstructure, it's another word for saying a bridge. The whole rail system is just a concrete
Yes.
bridge of 20 miles. So we
Yes.
can use a small term. Now, this bridge has been constructed to be only 2 lanes wide. If you all of a sudden now, merrily over here, decide that we need something to be 3 lanes plus a shoulder, so it makes it like a regular roadway, it is too heavy for the foundations. We have to do something different. It's not ready for the pillars that they put on the same pillars to put a 4-lane deck. That would not be supported. So maybe we need to have additional pillars, or we have to strengthen the foundations. The problem with bridges, is not the traffic on top of them. It's actually during the construction and the dead weight of its own. The live load, it's actually almost like, what can I tell you, the clothes on our back. It doesn't add on our weight significantly. So it doesn't matter if it's trains, buses, or regular traffic. It is the dead load, and having a much more massive and heavy structure is not sufficient for the foundations that they have designed. So other than the way it is now, if we were to use it purely as is, it would only fit guided buses, as many of them as we want. But other technologies are very difficult to convert as is. It needs more work.
And then the kind of buses that you're talking about, are they buses that could go into a
The streets.
neighborhood?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
They're the regular buses. You just, even the buses we have, it's not a special custom order bus. It's not a double decker. It's the same bus with a modification for the steering wheel. These are standard buses from American manufacturers, from Mercedes, from Volvo, whatever. It is a modification to the steering mechanism, which is a retrofit. So existing buses can become compliant within a few months.
All right, so if we had that, then we would have buses which would go into the neighborhood. They could go into Waianae,
Yes.
And
The Waianae Express, that's right.
right, right. And then when they get to the beginning of what is now the rail,
Mhm.
they could climb up and go
That's it.
65 miles an
Right.
hour and get into town.
That's right. And then spread. Mhm.
Whereas if you start at Ho'opili and get on the train stops every mile
Mhm.
and it goes 23 miles an hour. It is not going 65 miles
right.
an hour.
Mhm.
And then you have to take a bus to the start of the train.
That's correct.
At the end of the train in Ala Moana, if you don't work in Ala Moana,
You're done.
then
Another
you wait
mode.
for another bus.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
So
Yes.
these transfers are actually, people call them transfers,
Yeah.
but in the daily life are time penalties.
Oh, yes.
And that's
Time
why,
penalties.
that's one of the reasons why people actually choose the car. They are not in love with the car, but door to door, it delivers a more competitive time because of all these transfers and inconveniences that unfortunately mass transit, but as you said, bus much more direct.
Mm-hmm.
So then with this backbone, the moment that this infrastructure lands, like the overpass, if it lands downtown, the buses can start distributing people to Kalihi, downtown, Ala Moana, and beyond. It depends how far we take it and how much money we want to spend with it. For me, one of the things that could work for this, because I really don't want this ugly thing come and penetrate our town, our Kalihi, Chinatown, and downtown, I believe that perhaps with the rail money we can continue this all the way to Aloha Stadium and perhaps the airport. That would make rapid trips to those destinations on buses, and then find bus lanes and other ways, freeway shoulders, to facilitate the express buses to downtown.
So you're saying, will you explain exactly what you mean, going to Aloha Stadium?
Aloha Stadium, I use that because it is an excellent transfer facility. It has huge land in which I can have park and ride.
Yeah.
I have the room to land my facility there, spread my buses. Some of them go to Salt Lake, some of them go to the airport, some of them go to Kalihi, some of them take the freeway shoulder to go to downtown. It gives me an ability to spread my buses where they go. And
So have the elevated structure end at Aloha Stadium. Is
Right.
that what you're saying?
yes, that would be one preference. And the second one was the project when Governor Cayetano was still governor, 1994. It's called the Nimitz Viaduct. From the airport viaduct to downtown express 2 miles. That is a very necessary addition to speed the traffic to reach downtown. Between these two viaducts, the rail existing infrastructure to Aloha Stadium and the Nimitz Viaduct, we can solve the problem for less than $3 billion and maintain flexible bus transportation. Something we know how to do.
Well, I think you've put your fingers on the hot buttons here. If it were only about transportation,
Right.
but it's not about transportation. It's about transit-oriented development. And it would appear to me and many others that the problem here is that they want to put you on a fixed, inflexible guideway, and you are you're locked into using that Western corridor, and they want to make everything around it big time developments around all the stations, and you will not have that flexibility to necessarily go where you want to go without, as you were explaining it, using a tremendous amount of time. You're having transfer here, transfer there, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the biggest problem. I mean, I think most of us would agree the Western Corridor has terrible congestion. It's just awful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, maybe then, but nobody else. And so if it were to just cost a few more $100 for everybody to throw in, but this is an overly, over-the-top expensive
Project, yeah.
situation. They're saying that it could easily go to $9 to $10 billion if they add the extensions onto this, which would cost $4 billion to go to U of H in Manoa and then take it all the way back to inner city in Kapolei. Then you're talking, it's no longer
Close to
chump change.
Yeah.
It's
Close to 15 billion.
Yes, you're talking close to 15, and that is as long as they finish the route all the way to Ala Moana without those dastardly work changes
Right.
that add so much cost. If it costs them over $1 billion a mile in a cornfield, what's it going to cost them when they get down to the tough stuff?
So let's talk about that figure that you just threw out. For $3 billion, we could complete the type of bus system that you're talking about. Now, the rail tax, as it is written, is supposed to raise $5 billion.
That's correct.
And so without any extension, we could pay off whatever kind of breach of contracts we
That's
have
right.
to,
Yeah.
and never have any extension of the tax.
And have the busway. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
And that would take many more cars off the road than the rail would.
Absolutely.
It's a far more usable system, far more manageable. And you know, as we were talking about, and Cindy referred to development, we have a big development on the table. And I know you have a subsequent program you're going to talk about it, Ho'opili. But one point I want to bring about the Ho'opili is that literally the truth is out there. Ho'opili has done a pretty accurate, I would call it, traffic analysis. And in there, they show the amount of traffic that they will generate, and honestly also say that this amount of money, this amount of traffic will be switched to the rail. What is this amount of traffic? You would expect to hear something big, because after all, Ho'opili is a transit-oriented development with two
stations.
rail stations.
That's right.
What is it? 4%. 4%. That's exactly how much, whatever traffic, Ho'opili, of course, is going to be built in phases. Eventually, maybe something close to 15,000 homes, which could be something close to 40 to 50,000 people. They will generate a lot of trips. Out of every 100 trips, only 4 will be on the rail. What are the rest? 96. Okay, some of them will be walk trips, some of them will be mopeds and all. 90% will be cars. On what? She was just describing the nightmare on West Oahu today. So
Yes.
if rail is there to take the 4%, who is taking care of the 90%? And that is the hugest question, and nobody is willing to really see the elephant in the room. We have the cost elephant in the room, which is the rail, how to pay for the boondoggle. But then we have the traffic elephant, and nobody's looking at that.
Well, the other thing that really bothers me about this, too, we had a large town hall meeting several Mondays ago at Washington Middle School. And both the mayor and Dan Grabowskis, the head of HART, finally came out and said, well, it's not really meant to relieve traffic congestion. We're always going to have congestion. And then they compared this to New York City and San Francisco and every big metropolis you can imagine. And just the fact that they would sit there and say, but wait a minute, you promised us that there would be traffic congestion relief, big time, with this project. That was not true. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. And they just tiptoe, spin around it.
Here's another new thing that I just read about in my email, that at transit-oriented development, they plan to have all these big buildings near. That would be to concentrate people around there. Well, if you're within 192 feet
The noise.
of the track, you are going to have to keep your windows closed
And air conditioning on.
and the air conditioning on.
Yes. Not
This
very,
is
not very
something-
attractive, yes.
Right. This is something that I had not heard about. And it is, who wants to have air conditioning on all the time? The trains are going to run from 4 a.m. to midnight,
That's
something
right.
like that.
That's right. That's
So, you know, this is going to make life in the traffic corridor even worse.
Yes.
The other thing that concerns me about this whole development process is the fact that if you have developers putting all of this money into high-rises and new stores and so forth, these are going to be high high-powered stores that you're getting in there. You're going to have your Whole Foods and your expensive stores, because the amount of money per square foot to build these has gone way up.
Right.
So consequently, how are the lower income people that they're supposed to attract, how are they going to live there? They're going to have to get on the train and go back to where they came from to buy their groceries, to buy their needs. They're not going to be able to afford to live there. I think this whole affordable housing fiasco is going to come to a head.
Well, traditionally, TODs have been for white-collar, upper middle class.
Yes, that's where they
folks.
work. That's
Yes.
where they work.
That's right.
But for the
But
average,
my concern, since you brought up a very important issue of noise, is already existing neighborhoods. I mean,
Yes.
our Waipahu, our Kalihi, parts of Kaka'ako. I mean, within 200 feet, the level of noise is clearly unacceptable by Department of Health standards.
Yeah.
So that is a threat.
Yes, yes.
And these people, I mean, and again, because it's a threat then now, the public has to pay to make these residences compliant and essentially do something that the residents themselves may not want, such as take away their jalousies, which they like, and put, double pane windows and air conditioners, and close them for
Yes,
good.
and this would be a taxpayer expense.
It
oh,
will be
absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
because
Yeah.
the Department of
All
Health
right.
says that money can be spent for that reason if you don't meet the standard.
Now, we started out with, should the rail tax be extended? And of course, our answer is no.
No good reason for it.
No good
Right.
reason for it.
That's
No.
right. And with the solution that you have come up with, Panos, there is no reason to extend the tax,
That's
right?
right.
Absolutely.
Because without any extension of tax, we could have a solution to the traffic problem which costs less, and the tax that we have would pay for the whole thing. Now, we're almost out of time,
Sure.
and so I would like to give you a chance to say something.
What I said, and that was my testimony to the officials, is that any thought about extending any taxes for the rail is absolutely premature. Absolutely. And I agree with the timeout organization. It's time for a timeout. Let's rethink this.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And Cindy?
Yes. I'm with
All
him.
right. You have
I'm what he
24
said.
seconds. 24 seconds.
Well, I think that the moment they put out there on the table the idea of raising the get tax and extending it, that got people's attention. They realized, oh, gee, maybe we are getting into something that
Yes.
where we shouldn't be. And
And-
I think this time out is so appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Pearl Johnson with the League of Women Voters. Thank you.